Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Not Alfie.
Not Alfie, because that son of a bitch is like, oh, I haven't actually seen The Fly. And then I'm like, oh, well, fuck it. We'll talk about The Fly again. I don't give a shit. I'll talk about this fucking movie a billion times. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies. And then what does he do?
I'm pretty sure you've reviewed this before,
No,
right?
we have. We have reviewed this. I think you were even on the episode.
Oh, I am. Okay, cool. I thought this was familiar.
No, so I was like, it's fine. We'll talk about The Fly again, but Alfie will be here, so it'll be different. But no, Alfie, just disappointment. That's what Alfie is. That's what's here instead of Alfie is just disappointment.
He is British.
Yep. But I don't know, man. Like, I remember watching this movie when I was in like high school, and I remember talking about it when we did it last time, and I'm only going to have positive things to say, but I think my new take at this point, as this is stuck in my consciousness for so long, is that it is just damn near a perfect horror movie, and yeah, hands down at this point, one of my faves. I don't think... Like, I'd say The Shining is probably my favorite horror movie, just because that gives you a little more prestige because it's a Kubrick film. But at the same time, this one I've gone back and rewatched way more often, particularly because it's just so fucking short. You know, it's only an hour and a half. It's not a breeze to get through because, man, it's the longest hour and a half of your fucking life. But I don't know, man. This movie's fucking all-time great. That's what I've got to say about that.
We're gonna have a pretty short episode because this is legit one of the best horror movies of all. At the very least, at the very, very best horror movies of the 80s. But like even that's not saying quite enough. It's weird because I haven't seen a ton of David Cronenberg movies, and he's been making movies since the fucking 70s. So like there's a huge filmography here. And I don't know where The Fly is in terms of the other stuff he's done. Scanners is really good. I don't like it as much as The Fly. Crimes of the Future I've seen recently. I don't like it as much as The Fly. I think I like Cosmopolis more, but like that's maybe all I've seen from him. So I don't really have much to say as far as like the filmography side of it goes. But just on its own horror movie, peak 80s horror movie, but also just so well made and so well acted, and it's got such a powerful emotional thrust for being something that is also at the same time a little bit campy in places. In a lot of ways, it feels like it's a bit ahead of its time too, in trying to like really humanize Jeff Goldblum's character and what he's going through and his perspective on it, and how he's kind of like evolving and rationalizing every stage of the evolution as it's happening. The effects and makeup work is extremely good, and then Gina Davis turns in a legitimately great emotional performance, and the end when she just shoots him in the head and it's fucking over is one of the most depressing endings to a horror movie ever.
When he fucking crawls out of the machine and you don't know what he's going to be, and then it's just so sad as he like drags himself across the floor and hobbles to her. And you think, oh, he's gonna try... Now he's, like, fully become the monster, and he's still gonna try to kill her, and she's gonna have to defend herself in these last moments for him. And then he just fucking grabs the gun and puts it to his own head.
I know!
It's like, what's so good about that is Goldblum turns in such a great performance that I don't think he's at all underneath any of the animatronics or any of the effects work that they've done by that point, because it's just such an inhuman shape. I think that's all puppet work at the end of the movie. But Goldblum turns in such a great performance of, there are moments where he's like succumbing and losing himself to this monster, but he's never fully turning into a fly. There's still the person underneath. There's that humanity. There is that like just personality and tragedy of the character, that when you get to that moment of the thing putting the gun to its own head, saying, "Just kill me, please," it's just so fucking tragic. Like, I absolutely admire it for that, and I think all of it comes, or not all of it, but I think so much of it comes down to Goldblum's performance.
Oh no, he fucking kills it. I mean, he's in the makeup for a majority of it. They do have puppets for a lot of like the weirder stuff, like when he's flying around and towards the end when he gets his face blown off. But for a majority of the movie, he is the guy doing the makeup.
No, I meant at the very end, once the full monster.
I mean, at the very, very end, when he's just full monster and he gets his face blown off, like, that's all puppet work. But, like, for a majority of it, he is in makeup, and he is emoting, and you get to hear him walk around and talk and stuff, and he's fucking selling it. And it's not even just necessarily the human side of it, but it's also just that committed scientist mentality that he seems to, like, maintain all the way through, where, like, he's trying to think about how his body works now and how he has to eat like a fly, and that involves having to like melt his food with acid and then put it in because his stomach doesn't work the way it used to. All of the like the little quirks and stuff of him discovering how his body is working now and him trying to approach it with curiosity is both kind of endearing and extremely off-putting. And the movie is so good about like even making like really tiny things way more disgusting in the context of what you know is happening of him transforming. Like when the little tiny hairs start growing on his back for his wings, or even just like early on in the transformation when his face is like full of zits and stuff, but his whole rest of his body is like jacked and he's like running around doing acrobatics and stuff and having sex for like 4 hours. But there's still always this like push and pull with him of like, I see where he's wanting to go, but it's also getting kind of gross, and it just keeps scaling upwards and upwards and upwards until you get to that monster at the end. It's just such a good, like, build-up to what that fly creature ultimately is, and you never lose the person underneath.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the most impressive performances in any kind of, like, creature horror film. The fact that he's able to emote and do so much great physical acting through all the prosthetics too, is so fucking impressive. Because nowadays it would be done with CG and you'd get more of that performance capture kind of thing, and like every part of him would move as naturally as the human face does, and that would be, I suppose, interesting in some regard to see, but I think there is actually something really impressive and quite additive to the movie about how unnatural all the prosthetics make the facial expressions and movements require him to do as an actor. Because he's got to like find a way to act through it, and it's just, I don't know, it's very, very impressive to me.
Well, you got to understand, like, at a certain point, right? Like, everyone has to work in concert here. Of like, it's the actor having to come up with what the take is, but also designing makeup and prosthetics and stuff that mold to his face and move with the same motions that his eyes and cheek and nose are, and building sets where you could have him move around in small distances without risking messing up the makeup, and having really good consistent lighting to make sure everything is being captured, and you're not like just having him walk around in this big prosthetic suit wasting daylight. Like, it's one of these things where it seems so simple to just be like, guy in makeup as a monster scares your other actors, but the logistical side of how fine-tuned the production has to be to make this effective is really next level. And like David Cronenberg really shows how good of a director here he is, because this is a B movie at the end of the day. It's a B movie idea. It's a B movie budget. It's released in a stream of horror B movies, and it's so far above all of those. And it's all because everyone understands what their craft is. And you don't like discount Jeff Goldblum here as just like a quirky Christopher Walken style actor. He's like really doing something with this performance, and he's really committed to it physically and emotionally. And every other actor involved, with maybe the exception of like the shitty boyfriend who I don't love, is really selling the emotions of this. And I think in particular, this movie doesn't work if Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis don't feel like they have an emotional connection, and they always 100% do.
You know, something that just occurred to me when you were talking about the budget of this is so much like over 2/3 of the movie is all just in that apartment, right? Yeah. Like there's the scenes in the office, there's the scene at the beginning in like the gallery show, there's the scene in the shopping mall, there's the scene at the bar, and then there's the really like scary fucking, there's a couple scenes in Gina's apartment, and then there's the fucking abortion clinic, both dream sequence and the actual scene.
That dream sequence is terrifying.
Oh my fucking god! We'll talk about that in a minute. But like, what occurred to me with the budget point is with this small number of locations and the fact that a lot of this is just practical effects and stuff. This would be the fucking most terrifying play to do. You know, I remember fucking years ago, I went and saw a play adaptation of Misery. And I think you could do it with The Fly. Because, like, they even talk about the fact that, like, it's just the Vanishing Cabinet act. It's an old stage parlor trick. I'm like, no, but, like, you could just do that fucking magic trick on the stage, though. Like, everything about this, you know, you could find a way to get the effects work and get the fucking, like, prosthetics to apply quick enough, like, in scene transitions. Because there's, like, large sections where he's off screen and then you come back. There's really only one section where you physically see him, like, mutate on screen, and that's when he transforms into the monster.
Yeah.
You could fucking make a sick-ass stage play adapting this one.
I mean, like, it's barely got any relocations. Like, it's such a limited set that you could do a lot with it, too.
Oh, man.
You just need your actors to be able to make it work.
Yeah, no, this would be a fucking great stage play to adapt. I'd be fucking here for it. I wonder if anyone has adapted it. That's an interesting question. But yeah, let's table that for now, and let's talk about the fucking abortion scene. You know, you can only say that about so many movies.
So many good movies.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, okay. Number one thing about the abortion scene is this is a really big movie to talk about because it's allegorical for a lot of things, and Cronenberg himself talked about what he thought it meant. There was a big thing about when it came out of what people thought it meant, and that's kind of wished and washed and changed over the years just because it's such a loose metaphor. At the time when it came out, everyone thought that the transformation into the fly was like an AIDS metaphor, of basically becoming more and more decrepit and more monstrous and being allowed to do that and your loved ones having to watch you die. Cronenberg said that that's not what he was going for, but you could certainly see why, like, in the middle of the 80s, that'd be where people's minds go. The abortion scene, though, I feel like plays a lot better now than it would have in the past, because essentially this entire movie, like, if you take it from the perspective of Gina Davis's character instead of Jeff Goldblum's, and you just think about it in terms of, like, this woman who meets a man at a party, he's kind of weird and pushy and decides to take her back to his weird brownstone apartment / laboratory thing. For some godforsaken reason, she decides to go instead of questioning this. Ends up staying with this man who is slightly deranged and thinking he could make this work, transforming more and more into a monster, feeling like his ambitions are corrupting her, that culminate in that grotesque abortion scene where she shits out the giant maggot, and then at the end, not only being party to killing him, but falling to despair because this man was so much of her life at that point. It's a really good metaphor for just like abuse and breakup, and that specifically that abortion scene of what exactly it must feel like, how horrible it might be to think of like this idea of having something living growing inside you that you do not want. Forget the fact that it's a maggot, but just in real life, the idea that any human being has someone else growing inside of them, and how scary that must be if that's something you don't want. I feel like they channeled that really, really well, and you could like take that one scene out of the movie and just release it as a short film and it would work.
Yeah, for me, I think the thing that's always impressed me about it the most is it's just not something many movies feel comfortable in attempting to portray to any degree. It's just such a taboo subject matter, and I think that's what works so well about it from a horror perspective. Taking something that is seen as so, we don't talk about that. Like, yes, we as a society all acknowledge that it happens, that people go and get abortions, but it's never brought up. It's very poo-poo to talk about. Like, even if someone like attempts to make a joke about an abortion or something, or like doesn't matter how ridiculous or stupid it is, it's like seen as just immediately beyond the pale, and it's not like okay to do. I'm not saying that it should be. I'm just saying that's the attitude that like people approach this subject matter with. It is incredibly sensitive and incredibly risque in a very particular way because it hits on a particular like nerve as it probably should. But to see a movie like tackle it and be respectful of it, like they don't shame her, and you even get these moments of her like freaking out about doing it in that dream sequence. Oh, maybe it's not the right thing, maybe it's wrong, and then the fucking dream sequence reaches its conclusion with the fucking maggot, and then it starts attacking the doctors and shit, and everyone's just screaming their fucking heads off, and it's just absolutely fucking terrifying. It's the most. It's arguably it's one of the most like perfect horror scenes in any movie I've seen.
It really kind of feels like a successor to and literalizing of the chestburster scene in Alien, because it's a similar metaphor about that invasive species angle and the horror of that. But except instead of making it all metaphor in terms of aliens, here it's an actual birth, it's an actual abortion, and the metaphor is all in the maggot itself. And so you preserve how rarely you see that on film and the metaphor at the same time. It's really, really clever in that way. And this is the kind of horror movie that I feel like does actually have a lot in common with Alien, where I feel like you could talk about both movies in terms of ideas of sexuality and how much the monster itself in both movies is representing some form of sexual violence.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. I don't know. I'm really, really impressed by this film. It's... Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, can we talk about the one thing I don't like about this movie?
Oh, sure.
All right, the one thing I don't like is Gina Davis's reporter boss / ex-boyfriend. I really don't like the way that dude is played. I don't mind his dialogue so much. I kind of like how kind of jackassy and sexually forward he is, because I think that kind of plays into what the movie's going for, especially if you decide to watch it from Gina Davis's perspective as opposed to Jeff Goldblum's. But to me, I feel like everyone in this movie is turning in a really good sort of committed performance, and no one's treating it like a B movie. I think that dude 100,000% is playing it like the sidekick in an 80s movie, and it's really distracting to watch every time he comes on screen. I think he's like by far the weakest actor in the whole bunch.
Which is, it's a good thing that he's not in it for very much, you know? Like, he's there for a good chunk. He's probably the third most featured character, but that's because there's, like, 5 characters, you know?
Yeah.
So, it is I would agree that his performance is definitely the weakest, but I mean, you're going up against Jeff Goldblum, who I think you could make an argument has not had a better performance before or since. This might be Jeff Goldblum's single greatest performance on film. I like Dr. Ian Malcolm as much as the next guy, but nah. It's just not on this level. And he's mostly just done like a lot of joke performances since that, in more recent years. He's kind of embraced being a meme. And I don't know, man, this is like the one where I feel like he was kind of fucking born for this role, or I can't imagine anyone else doing it as well as Goldblum does here. So, like, you know, not great to have to go up against that in a film. And then...
For sure.
Then Gina Davis is just such a great, almost like perspective character, I guess you could argue. And she's doing so much good work. Because she's doing a good job of being, like, visibly shaken by everything that is happening and that she's seen happen to this man that she was falling in love with. But at the same time, it's not going overboard to that point of, you know, like the original 50s Fly of just the screaming banshee woman kind of thing. She's doing a really good job of like showing real, genuine fear and shock, as opposed to just hamming it up, you know?
Yeah, this is one of those rare movies that I feel like it is a remake and it's better than the original, and it's not
absolutely.
even a contest.
Not even.
It's not like the original 50s Fly is a bad movie per se, like it's fine, but it's really forgettable, especially in the minds of creature features. But this one like eclipses it. Like really the only other horror movie I can think of that's a remake that's infinitely better is The Thing, which is also an 80s remake of a 60s movie.
Mm-hmm.
Or a 50s movie.
It's kind of crazy because the original Fly is 58, right? And this is 86. So it's not even 20 years... Sorry. Yes? It's barely... it's not even 30 years later.
Original Fly, yeah, is 58 and this is 86, so yeah, it's like 28 years later.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of impressive.
Which is really not that bad. Yeah,
that's a pretty quick fucking turnaround for, like, this definitive of a great remake. So it's so weird to me that Vincent Price is in The Fly, and yet he's not the dude. Vincent Price was fucking in everything, but simultaneously actually played no one.
Yeah, Vincent Price, it feels like you could kind of put Vincent Price and Jeff Goldblum in a similar camp, too, of, like, being kind of character actors that gets pigeonholed into doing sort of bit parts for a lot of their career. Vincent Price does a lot of really good work in other places, but I don't think The Fly is really it versus Jeff Goldblum, where I feel like this is definitely, like, his definitive movie. You're right. Like, I love Dr. Ian Malcolm as much as anyone else. I think he's got the best line in Jurassic Park, but also I think he's got one of the best lines of any movie ever when he talks about, like, the scientists treating the Discovery like a kid who's finding their dad's gun. Like, it's such a good moment.
Mm-hmm. But
he's a bit character. He's a side character. He's in it for, like, collectively 12 minutes compared to this.
Yeah, and then they give him the second movie to be the starring lead man, and he's not playing the same character. You'll never convince me.
No, he's not playing the same character at all. He's playing basically an action hero in that movie.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's just not the same. Like, Dr. Ian Malcolm in the second movie is so different than his characterization in the first. I didn't see the latest Jurassic World where he came back. I don't know if it's any good or if he gets to go back to that original Ian Malcolm or not. So
honestly, I gave up on those movies. It's one of the few movies I don't watch at this point is any of the Jurassic World ones.
I'm still, like, I was talking to someone on Twitter about this a couple weeks back. It's like, you know what, the title,
that was your first mistake.
Well, no, actually, this was a rare good conversation on Twitter. Whereas, like, you know, with a title like Jurassic World, it's really weird that they just went back to the park when, you know, part of the whole like argument of the first film is you don't know what you're doing. This can get out of hand so easily. This can go so wrong. Just fucking do Dinosaur Apocalypse, the movie. Like, what the fuck were you thinking? The premise is right there, and arguably, you couldn't possibly have a better title for it. And yet they decided to go with mutated dinosaur threats and just repeating the beats of the first movie. Very strange. I'm looking through fucking Jeff Goldblum's filmography, and apparently he voiced Ian Malcolm in Jurassic World Evolution 2.
Is that a video game?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that that was a thing. All right.
He's the voice of God in Happy.
In
Grant,
what?
Happy, the Grant Morrison television
Oh,
series.
the Grant Morrison thing. Right.
Yeah.
He's in Asteroid City from this year. He's in it for like 30 seconds, but it's fantastic.
I don't know. Like, I'm looking through. He's appeared in a lot. I feel like he got a real big boost post Thor Ragnarok. But yeah, I forgot he came back for Independence Day.
I forgot there was an Independence Day sequel.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, man, he just really kind of fell off the map. Grand Budapest. Okay, that one's fair. He's good in that. Not the Fly level though.
Well, it's just a cameo in that movie, I'm pretty sure. He's only in it for like one scene.
Yeah. I forgot he did Law and Order for a bit. Okay, this is getting less interesting as I'm going on. Side note, I did Google it earlier. In 2008 in Paris, they did an opera performance of The Fly based heavily off of this movie, but set in the 1950s.
That seems like fun. That's a fun combo. Opera and the 50s and The Fly? Damn.
Yeah. All three things that I love.
to rein it back, yeah, I mean, and part of the reason Goldblum and Gina Davis are so good in this is that they were dating at the time and they got married after the movie. So, like, they already have, like, a lot of natural chemistry with each other, which is probably why it works. The opening, like, 10, maybe not even 10, but like the opening 5 minutes or so, where he's meeting her at the party and convincing her to come back to his place, on paper were kind of strange and feel like a B horror movie premise of like, why would this woman ever follow this man to a strange secluded building like this? And then like 10 minutes into that exchange be like, maybe I should leave now. At this point, after I have already entered the door and seen things I shouldn't have, now I should leave. But because these two play it so well, it kind of transcends past that writing. And that's effectively where the whole movie goes from there, is I feel like those two are getting good interactions, but their natural chemistry is what's really making it click and what's really making it work. Because if you don't buy the relationship these two have, the movie doesn't work at all. It's not just about Jeff Goldblum becoming Brundlefly. It's about the deterioration of this relationship as a consequence of that. And so, like, they're doing such really good work and such elevated work. So, like, you can't blame the other guy for not being quite as good. But it does kind of feel distracting to me because I feel like it's the one part of the movie that feels of its era. In a lot of ways, this doesn't really look and feel like an 80s movie. It doesn't have like the high contrast lighting. It's not a bloody slasher
It's the fashion.
movie.
The fashion is really the only giveaway.
Yeah, really the big hair and the oversized coats are the only thing that really make it feel like an 80s movie. And more than that, it kind of like pushes towards that 90s style of horror movie anyway. So like it's already kind of ahead of the curve. And the one thing that pulls it back is the need for this sidekick character that's just kind of an asshole that feels very 80s. And so like it's not only the fact that his acting's not great, it just sort of feels like it's a part that needs to be utilized differently to fit with the rest of the movie, and it just never quite works.
Side note, apparently he played Ichabod Crane in a 1980s made-for-TV movie of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I'm actually genuinely curious about that.
Jeff Goldblum did?
Yes.
Wait, what? That's awesome.
I know, right? That sounds fascinating. But no, I went through his entire IMDb. The only argument you could make for a more iconic role, because nothing else has been nearly as successful or long-lasting, is Ian Malcolm. And just the fact that he is the featured character here makes immediately that he stomps all over that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah, and it's so I fucking love this movie so fucking much, man.
It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. It's one of those movies that I forget is good until I watch it again.
It's so impressive because, you know, you talk about how, oh, well, she should fucking leave right away. She shouldn't come home. This is like this unassuming, you know, this is a creepy situation. This building's terrifying. You know, absolutely. Absolutely. She's, like, in over her head. She's making the wrong decisions right away. And I think that's interesting how that kind of sets her up for the whole fucking movie because she keeps making the wrong fucking decisions in this movie.
Oh, no, 100%. 100%. I mean, she's introduced to us making a weird decision that makes her feel kind of like an idiot. And then immediately after that, you start meeting her ex-boyfriend, who was also a bad decision. And then getting into a relationship with Brundle is a bad decision. And the sheer amount of things that escalate from there are all just bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Also, just for what it's worth, I'm really impressed by how strong the opening of this movie is. Again, like, it's such a short movie, but you get to what the premise is going to be. You get to the exciting thing pretty fucking fast in just that opening 10 to 15 minutes. You've got the teleporters introduced and the premise of what, of like how the movie is going to get to its point really fucking fast. I feel like a lot of other movies would take forever to get there.
It's kind of got like this bell curve to it as far as the pace goes, because the beginning moves at a clip and the end moves at a clip. So much so that by the end, I was worried for a second, like, wait, is this a shortened cut? Is there more? But there doesn't really need to be more. Like, it just begins and ends super, super quickly. It's really in that middle where it doesn't drag, but it's taking its time a lot more to help you appreciate the transformation into the Fly, which the process for that starts pretty early on, but watching that whole slow progression and those little ticks and behaviors and stuff change, you're really like well over halfway past the movie before he really starts looking like a fly.
Mm-hmm. And it's impressive to me because I really like, again, on the performance side of this, where when he doesn't know what's happened to him, he's more like susceptible and influenced by these like very base insect instincts, you know. I want to fuck, I want to eat sugar, I want to fuck, and I want to eat sugar, and I want to fight. Like that's all he is. But then just that second that the fucking shoe drops, that he figures it out, that like it's not because anyone tells him. Like, obviously Ronnie tells him that he's changed, that something went wrong, but he doesn't believe her. It's not until he fucking sees it for himself when his fucking nails fall off and he's shooting acid out of his fingers, that he's like, oh no. And then that rational side comes rushing back, and he has moments with those outbursts, those very like animalistic rages that he goes into, but they're really, really far and few between, and they're used so well. When he fucking like he senses that like his offspring is threatened, so he goes to kidnap her, and like there's a humanity side for it. That's why it's like it's clear that side kind of like got convinced along the way with the urge. But then when he's like actually fighting the X, and he just goes full fucking insect on him, just like catches his hand and looks at him, and he's just like bleh, and fucking goes after the leg. Oh my god, the effects work in that moment, but just everything's so heightened and playing off of each other so fucking well.
The thing about like her trying to get the abortion, and then he grabs her away from it, and his whole rationale is the baby growing inside of her is the last bit of his humanity, where that line of dialogue is really interesting because it speaks to the idea that he is kind of missing his own humanity and that he kind of regrets it. But the delivery is not at all. And the behavior he has before and after that scene isn't either. And so like there's this fun little contradiction of like how much of his humanity is he really wanting to preserve versus how much of this is that sort of scientist rationale thing again of like wanting to see what this new thing being born would ultimately look like or feel or be, Would it be a progression from him? Would it be a regression? Like, there's kind of a curiosity to it before the tragedy of it even really sets in, and I love that.
Mm-hmm. I just love how much the movie builds to this climax and how perfect it is, and the fact that he's like really up until that last moment, he's, you know, attacking the dude and going full insect on him, and then Ronnie just speaks up, and then he's back. He's like, help me. And she's like, how? And he, you know, he goes up there and he brings her down. It's like, he's so, you know, chivalrous in that moment, I suppose. And he shows her the pods and what his plan is to preserve his humanity and fight back against the insect. And like, he's just too far gone. He's just, we keep talking about like his rationale and his scientific inquiry, and it's really fascinating how he's trying to hold on to that, because that is the predominant part of his human personality, but he's holding on to it so hard that it's detaching him too much, and it's becoming like this slow descent into madness, where he can't see how like horrific or how terrible the things he's doing or asking are. So he's like, you and the baby and me all merged together into one. We'll be the closest family ever. And then the fucking it's such great, like, I love horror and I love dark comedy, so when you put those things together, you get some of the just most, like, this was made for Ian Michael Harrington and no one else. So when he's like, Brundlefly, you know, it'll be a great program for kids. Any fucking parent, like, what parent in the world is gonna let their fucking child watch a Brundlefly? Now, children, you see, Brundlefly doesn't eat like a human. Even though he has teeth that he can mash food up and swallow it just fine, his internal organs can't process it. He found that one out the hard way. He has to eat more like a fly, which when he secretes an acidic compound all over his food, melting it into a liquid, and then he sucks it up, and then it just fucking cuts to the dude watching the video, and such brilliant, like, use of discretion in filmmaking, of letting you fill in the details with your head, but also like being super budget conscious of, we can't probably afford to actually show the food melting and him sucking it up. It's not going to look as good. And just the fucking cutaway and the sounds of the fucking guy's just watching it, and his face just turns to shit. You know, Steve, you're wrong. His performance is not terrible. His performance does not bring this down, because that fucking reaction alone is just like worth all the other terrible shit he does in this movie. Brundlefly, I am curious. You know, for kids.
I am curious, did you ever watch the sequel? Do you know if that's really that bad, or is it, like, watchable at least?
You know, I was thinking about watching it because of this, but I didn't get around to watching it. I've never watched it. I've heard actually decent things about it. Like, I don't think Cronenberg's involved, so it's not quite... It's not going to be on the same level. You'd be, like, kind of... You'd be doing yourself a disservice to go into it expecting it to be on the same level.
For sure.
Like, it kind of has the advantage of, it just embraces everything that worked about the first movie, and just does continue on the hype and the disgusting body horror aspects of the film, to just fucking go into it. Because, like, I don't remember the conditions that led to this, but apparently... Oh, okay, yeah, here's what it is. So, Ronnie, by the end of the movie, has not had her abortion.
Right.
And basically, I believe the sequel picks up, like, seconds after the end of the first movie, and basically, like, some government bodies come in and just take her away, and I don't even think they get the actress back. just take her away and basically force her to have the kid, and then the government is like watching the kid grow up and observing his behavior while also simultaneously trying to reverse engineer everything Seth Brundle did to create the teleporter. And they're having like real shit jobs because they can't quite figure out the innovation that he did with the flesh. So like there's this really fucked up scene of this dog that they tried to send through the teleporter, but it didn't work, but it's not as bad as the monkey because it's still alive, and like just this fucking deformed monstrosity that's like crawling to a dog bowl and shit. So like they get kind of the right vibes, I think, is like a fair assessment. It's not on the same level. It's not like a Aliens following Alien kind of level sequel, but it's also not like a Alien Resurrection or Alien 3 kind of sequel.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be particularly great. I was just kind of curious because you like this movie so much, you had seen the sequel. The only thing I know about the sequel is that Keanu Reeves turned it down.
It's too bad. It's too bad. Like, no, like legitimately, because if they had gotten, you know, not necessarily a name, because it'd been the late 80s, early 90s, Keanu Reeves wasn't super popular yet. But
hadn't had The Matrix or Speed yet, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't even think he'd had Bill and Ted yet at that point.
Maybe. I don't know about that.
I feel like Bill and Ted is like 89 or early 90s. I can't remember which. But anyway, you know, if you'd had like a talent, not just necessarily a name, but a talent, because Jeff Goldblum wasn't really a name before this, but he's just such a good fucking talent. I feel like you could probably turn out, you know, just with the material, you act it right, you'll probably get some fucking surprise hits out of this. And if nothing else, the sequel has more of a budget because of how successful this was for the studio, so, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the kind of movie where, like, you don't expect it to find an audience necessarily, so you're pleasantly surprised when it does, and so you immediately want to try and do more with it. And so the fact that this, outside of that one sequel, as far as I know, never became a franchise is kind of surprising. Especially because, like, any horror movie that did remotely well between the 70s and 80s became a franchise. So, like, if you can fucking make a Hellraiser sequel, it's surprising that you can't make, like, multiple Fly movies.
God, I can never forget the fact that we watched Hellraiser and said, man, this isn't very good. Maybe the sequel's better. And then we watched the sequel and it was like, man, this isn't very good. How did this get, like, 12 fucking movies?
I still fucking get those movies. I've seen the first Hellraiser times now. I still don't fucking get it. Someone explain it to me. I'm dumb, apparently.
No, I refuse. It's not a good movie. That's all you need to know.
I mean, probably. But no, I mean, back to this one at least. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, like, it's such a fun concept on its own to do fucked up shit with, like the fact that he's like slowly deteriorating into a fly, but it never like really resorts to gimmicks or like cheap stunts that a lot of other horror movies around this era would. Like, it's not trying to like gross you out for the sake of, like, you know, kind of like a jump scare logic. It's really doing this from the perspective of you have to feel why what you're watching is upsetting you a little bit. You have to care about the monkey going through the teleporter and then coming out in the guts. You have to care about Jeff Goldblum having things in his life to live for and the things that he is sacrificing as he becomes more and more of a fly. And you have to kind of register that disconnect between his inability to kind of go back and examine what he's turning himself into with your own ability to do it, and having like the point of view character in Gina Davis to watch that deterioration. It's really smart about it. It's not trying to just like gross you out for the sake of grossing you out. And I feel like David Cronenberg as a director in general, because he's kind of got a name for doing body horror, is always really good about that. He's always really good about the whole sort of bigger question of what is a person's relationship to their body, such that you can make certain kinds of statements, whether they're like stomach churning or not, about it. Like Crimes of the Future, which came out last year, that whole movie is just about like the art of how you can manipulate your body and literally turn it into some kind of meaning, and whether or not it's worth doing in some ways versus others, and how it's a point of resistance when it's the only kind of freedom you have at the end of the day is what you do to your body. So like he's kind of like been cultivating this for decades and decades, but The Fly is not like a B-movie version of that more sophisticated stuff he does down the line. He's just as good about that stuff here as he would ever be later.
Yeah, I do really respect it that this doesn't feel like phoned in at all. You know, for being
No,
just
not
a
even a little
remake,
bit.
I feel like he was actually really attached to the material, which is so funny because I've seen the original Fly, and yeah, it's not great. It is very like, you know, even for that era of schlocky horror movies, it's not very memorable. I think it is just the novelty of the premise is it's just such a unique and interesting premise of the idea of a teleportation machine gone wrong, and merging the human and fly together. The funny thing is, the fly doesn't even actually do that. It's so weird because it like swaps their heads and hands. Because what happens is the man, we'll call him Brundle. I don't think he's actually Brundle in the original movie.
No, it's not.
The scientist gets the head and the hand of the fly, and then at the end of the movie, you see that the fly has the scientist's head and arm and hand. But what's weird is they don't swap brains. Is kind of the odd thing. So like the end of the movie, you've got the fly trapped in a spider web, and it's just going, "Help me, help me, help me," as the fucking spider comes to attack it. But like the whole fucking movie, you're watching this scientist try to figure out how to save himself, and he's like not letting anyone. He doesn't want to let anyone in the room because he's convinced the fly is still in the room with him, and if he can find the fly, then he can fix everything that just happened to them. But then fucking tragedy and shit goes wrong, and he's not like turning into more of a monster, he's just becoming unable to fucking cope and deal with what the fuck has happened to him.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's interesting, it's novel, but again, it's all
also
fucking
like
set in the lab, and I don't know, it's just very 50s.
It's also like good monster movie makeup for the 1950s too, though.
Yeah.
Like the 50s man with a bug head is kind of fucking scary to look at, not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
I will say, though, one thing that is surprising is that the original black and white 58 has more sequels than this one does. That one has 2 sequels, apparently.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, like nothing about this sort of feels phoned in at all. I'd say they're a bad movie per se, but like it's definitely like very run of the mill for the era, and this in general feels like not maybe necessarily a passion project, but definitely someone who saw the script and was like, there's a lot of potential here. You can do so much with this. It's the kind of thing that you kind of hope for in blockbuster movies today that you don't always get, which is if you're gonna make kind of lowest common denominator mass media entertainment, then you have a really large audience, which means you can do things that are smarter or more interesting to get segments of that audience thinking about things more complexly. Like what we were talking about with the Barbie movie. So like this does that really well. Like you've already kind of got a small audience because it's an R-rated horror movie. But you've got a bigger audience than you might otherwise have because you've also got all the people who love going to fucking slashers in the mid-'80s. So like why don't you do something like that, but you have something more complex at the heart of it, something that's really turning the emotional beats of the monster movie that are more than just death, because no one like really goes out of their way and like dies or gets slashed up in this movie, really. Mm-hmm. You've got the one dude whose hand gets busted up, and then you've got boyfriend guy who gets spit on, and it's kind of scary. Yeah, who gets all melted up, but like it doesn't have a high body count by any stretch.
The Fly 1958 survival horror game where a teleport experiment goes wrong. Fuck it, I'd play.
I would need some alcohol, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just Google imaging 1958 The Fly now. I just sent you that really fucking cool double feature poster someone made. I like that. There's been a Fly box set collection where it's all of the movies, including the 50s and the 80s ones. That's kind of cool.
I'd probably get that just out of curiosity. I've only ever seen the original and the original Cronenberg one. I've never seen any of the sequels.
I mean, maybe like you were joking about it in the group chat of how we've done all the horror topics early this year, and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, maybe I'll just fucking pick The Fly for every week of Geeky Gentlemen Horror Month. We'll just watch like the sequel to this, and we'll watch the fucking remake or the original 58 and the sequels to that.
You just gotta tell like an AI prompt to like do The Fly 2, except make it Keanu Reeves, and we'll see if it's worth watching.
There we go. I'll call it Corridor Digital because they've been getting in some shit, so that'll be fun. I don't know. You talk about this being a short episode, and we're like about 20 minutes short of where we'd normally end, but I don't know how much else I have to say about this. That 20 minutes could have just been fucking Alfie being useful and talking about this because I was real curious about it. Like, I've actually never seen The Fly. I have talked about this movie so fucking much, and you never bothered to watch The Fly, you son of a bitch.
It is kind of interesting. I mean, this is not going to fill 20 minutes, but I just want to say it is kind of interesting that, like, this feels like a very quintessential American horror movie, because, like, it's body horror, it's a monster movie, it's about science gone wrong, it has, like, a relationship at the heart of it, in a way that, like, a lot of British horror movies that he's probably familiar with are more like folk horror things of, like, haunted towns and witches in the forest and stuff like that. So that's always a fun perspective. You never really have much of a chance to like do a crossover of like an American horror movie that kind of has the vibes of a British horror movie. You like very occasionally get it with stuff like The Witch, but in general it's not a big thing. I feel like a lot of our horror movies are a little bit more in that like campy B-movie quality tier as opposed to a lot of the British horror movies, which are literally campy B horror movie tier, but are trying and aspiring to be a bit more than that. And The Fly kind of meets them in the middle a little bit more because it is legitimately good.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. Okay, but, in all fairness, I'm just fucking, again, Google image searching. The Fly 2, the fucking monster design is fucking peak. Holy shit.
The 80s Fly or the 50s Fly?
The 80s. Holy
okay, all right.
Fuck, that's terrifying. Okay.
I'm here for it. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. I just wanted to talk about it. I didn't expect you to actually...
I need to know. You can't say that shit. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Looks like the fucking Violator.
Oh. Fucking Todd McFarlane. I need to commission Todd McFarlane to do some of the Fly art.
Jesus.
You think he's busy?
Not so much anymore. Who reads Spawn?
Right.
Damn, that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, fuck it. Man.
That also feels very 90s.
Yeah, because, The Fly 2 would have been... Fucking, what was it?
It might have still been the 80s, because this is only 86. 89, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Fucking bullshit.
I guess one last thing okay. Well, one last thing I'll say is I do really like Howard Shore's score for this. It's understated, it's good, it's creepy, it's melodramatic. It kind of adds to that campy nature of it that I still really like. Maybe not the greatest music track in the world. Maybe it's the exception that proves the rule about great horror movies always having great music. But it's good. It's not bad or anything. It's just kind of understated.
Okay, fair enough. I don't really have any other thoughts on this. I fucking love this movie. Top tier horror movie. I do actually need to go and like get a physical copy of this. I don't know. It's probably due for a re-release at some point. But yeah, I think...
you're just shy of its 40-year anniversary now, right?
Oh,
just a few more years.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're gonna end it there. We'll figure out what to talk about next time. I've gotta run real quick. So
Okay.
Until next time, everyone. I'm the Philosopher,
And I'm the Fly.
and we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.